Hi, this is Debbie Mazzullo from DataQuest. I thought it might be easiest for me to prepare a little video to talk about importing using Acumatica's import scenarios to migrate your data from Sage 300 to Acumatica. There are three components required to begin this process. I'm going to use AP vendors as our first example of how to import. So the first thing that we have is an Excel spreadsheet that is a template for that we're going to populate to bring in all of our vendors. So we can dump our vendors from Sage or whatever our legacy system is that we're migrating into Acumatica. And we have a column here for all the pertinent pieces of information. So the first element of migrating data is this spreadsheet. The first thing we have is a data provider in Acumatica. So under the integration workspace, under profiles, we have the profile of a data provider, and this particular one is the one for import vendors that we've created. And attached to it is that Excel file that we just looked at. So what attaching this file to this data provider does is builds the schema, which is a listing of all of the fields that are in that Excel spreadsheet. So if, for example, there were fields that, this time we didn't want to bring in, we can just uncheck the box and make it inactive. So the first element is the spreadsheet, the second element is the data provider, and the third element is an import scenario. So an import scenario is another profile. You give an import scenario a name, you tell it where you're going to be, what is the screen that you're going to import into. So in this case, we drill down and we see we want to import it into vendors. And then we link it to that data provider we just set up and the worksheet in that Excel file called template. So if you had multiple ones, you would just tell what sheet is your active sheet that you want to work with. We have different types because we can say that we want to import every single record in that data provider, or we could say just ones we hadn't already imported. So we could say incremental ones only and reuse that same spreadsheet. Now what's in this mapping here is a listing of the target object then is in Acumatica. What is the field, or what is the object, so the summary of the vendor, and what is the field on that view of the entity, what's the field we're populating, and then what field is it in that Excel spreadsheet that we're pulling from to populate in Acumatica. So if you look at these target objects over here, if I flip open my vendor, and go to create a new vendor, you'll see they match up with these areas here, main contact or general info, and then under general info you have main contact, main address, financial settings, then you have payment settings. So let's go back over here and look again. So we have vendor summary, general information, main contact, main address, financial settings. So these target objects follow the areas on that object, and then these are the specific fields, and then here you're telling it what column in the Excel spreadsheet you're pulling into that field. You can build formulas that says if it's null, what to do with it, how to populate it. Again, these can be active or inactive, so if some of these don't apply, you can uncheck and make it not active. Now, I'm giving you this overview, but these are pre-built for you. You don't really have to do anything with this. I just want you to understand what's going on. There actually is one more piece And that those are the three pieces, right? The Excel spreadsheet, the data provider, and the import scenario. But then how do you get it in? How do you make it happen? That's done by an import by scenario, which I've opened in a separate window here. So what you would do then is to upload your file. So you've built your Excel file, right? You've put all your vendors here, all the data that you want. And then you would, in Acumatica, you would come to import by scenario. You would upload that current file, which would put it out here. It'd be an attached file. And then you would prepare and import. So if we go back to Acumatica, notice that on the vendor setup, remember we talked about things that are in the red asterisk means that it's a required field, and a gray asterisk means that it's going to be defaulted by some previous piece of information. So for example, if the vendor class is here, then this is defaulting to this vendor class because we set that up in our preferences as our default vendor class. US is the default country code, etc. So all values in the spreadsheet for things like vendor class, terms, your payment methods, your cash accounts, your GL expense accounts, anything that you put in this spreadsheet must obviously already be set up in Acumatica. So you can't populate those tables at the same time that you are importing all of your vendors. Next thing I want to say is that things like, again, these country codes in here, instead of USA, it's looking for US, it's looking for the actual, it's going to validate all the state 2-digit codes, it's going to validate postal codes. If it was Canada, it has to be a valid format for a Canadian postal code. So it's very important that you use legitimate codes. When you get here to your 1099 vendors, a 1 means yes, it's a 1099 vendor. A blank means it's not a 1099 vendor. And then when you talk about what you put in these boxes, that you can go back to Acumatica and see that in the 1099 box, if you click that it is a 1099 vendor, it opens up a new box, and there are preset by IRS codes. So let's go back and now go ahead and do it. We have, do the import. We have no vendors yet, and I'm going to go to, sorry, let me minimize this. This has been saved. I'll save it again just to make sure. And if I then come back to Acumatica and go again to our import by scenario, which is when I go to import by scenario, I pick the import that I'm doing. So I'm going to import vendors, and then I'm going to upload my current file. So I'm going to browse out, and I'm going to find that file on my hard drive and open and upload. It does not put another, it's not like that's the second file out there because it's named exactly the same. But if I want to be sure that it really got my current one, I can click here. I can see that it's dated today, and then I can click edit and see that yes, in fact, it was just done at this time. So I can close out of my file maintenance and close out of my upload view here, and I know I've got the right file. Now I'm going to click prepare, and you see it brought that data in. This is the data from that spreadsheet. Okay, this is what we had on the spreadsheet. And now I can click, oh, and I got my green checkbox here, meaning there was no errors. If there was something wrong, like let's just say we didn't have the correct state code for Missouri, then over here there would be an, in the error box there would be an error message, and you would hover over it and it would tell you that the state code was incorrect. So it will tell you the specifics of what's wrong with it. Once I've prepared my data and I like it all, by the way, I can just fix errors here. Like let's say this was MI instead of MO, and I want it to, it's supposed to be MO. I could change it, type over it, and then I could just save it. I don't have to go back out to the Excel spreadsheet, re-up and make the change, re-upload the file version, and then prepare and import again. I can make my changes right here. It's a trade-off where you want to make the changes depending on how massive they are. If they're simple, you know, generally you just make them in this prepared data and save and import. Okay, so let's go ahead and import now. And here we do see we got a red X. One item has not been successfully, and it does not like this AVEND 02. And if I hover over it, it's because in this line we have a GL account 51,000, and it's telling us that that isn't a valid GL account in our general ledger. So if I go back out to, for example, and to chart of accounts, and I'll open that in a new tab, I can see that 51,000, whoops, went too far. 51,000 is not a valid account, but let's just say 55,100 is. So if we come back over here and we do 55,100, and notice I've got my expense account in here too. So you want to remember your portions of your expense account to populate this so you bring in accurate data. So I'm going to save it and I'm going to import. I don't prepare again because prepare is what pulls it to this screen. I just import. And what it did then was imported anything that wasn't already processed. Okay, so we got our green check mark that says that everything imported properly. And if I go back to our vendors and take a look, we can see they are here. They are in fact here, and we can open them and go through all of this and see that they are correct. So in a nutshell, that's how you will migrate data, import data into Acumatica by filling out a Excel spreadsheet, having a data provider that is linked to an import scenario, and then importing by scenario. Hope that was helpful. Thank you. Bye.